back from Oshkosh, and it's time to get back to work, as Mike Patey says. So, wanted to kind of go over the wheel situation as far as what I'm doing differently rather than the standard build. So this is just kind of an overview of things. So this is what's on the plans currently. This is a Matco wheel that comes with the kit. You can kind of see on here that there's the shaft here, the back portion of the brakes. There's the guide here for the wheel spat, and then the wheel shaft here. There's a bearing. There's a little spacer here for the brakes that goes in there, and then the brake pad itself goes around the brake on the wheel itself. Another bearing, and then the nut that holds it together at the end. This is the center shaft that was represented here, and that goes through all the way to the front, and then the thin piece here actually attaches to the spat on the other side. So that's what the instructions are. This is what the actual wheel looks like. So this is the brake here, or the disc here, and then the actual brake pads and whatnot are in there. And there's several pieces to this. So there's the bottom piece, this little shim that goes in there, and then the top portion of the brake. It does have this guide mechanism that goes in here as well. And then this is the shaft itself. So that's just kind of an overview of the back side of it. Now I am upgrading to the Beringer wheels for this kit. One of the big advantages is well, there's quite a few actually, but one of the things I do like is that this wheel uses a inner tube, as opposed to the Beringer one is a tubeless. So that's a big one right there for me. So it's just one more thing that doesn't have to wear out. So let's take a look over here at the Beringer, and this is what the Beringer wheel looks like. You can see it's kind of different straight away. So the braking mechanism here kind of floats on top like it does here. The shaft, however, is a little different on how it goes together, and then this is the brake disc itself. So I'll take a little bit of this apart. I have to stop the camera here, but I'll take it apart and kind of compare the pieces as it goes down the line. Okay, so I've got the wheel disassembled a little bit here. So these are all the parts. The wheel does come apart a little bit more. There's some bolts that hold the two halves together, and I'm just not taking it apart for this particular purpose. But this is the disc where the brake is actually compressing against, as opposed to the Beringer one. This part is actually independent and sets just kind of down inside those openings, just like that. So if we take a look at the size of the disc here, so let's compare the two. This is the Matco one underneath and the Beringer one underneath. So you can kind of see, it's a little tough to see in the video, but the size of the disc is actually much larger on the Beringer one than on the Matco. Another thing that's really kind of interesting is that the Beringer actually uses sealed bearings as part of their bearings for the wheel itself. And the Matco ones have unsealed ones, so they're basically, one goes in this side here, and when you turn it over, there's another set of bearings that go in this side here, and then that forms that. Just seems to me like that is a potential for dirt and some extra wear on that wheel that you might not normally get with what the sealed brakes are. Probably one of the things that's most pronounced is the size of the wheel shaft itself. So this is the Matco one here, and then this is the Beringer one. This does introduce a little bit of a problem, because if you look at the end here, this is a square end here, and then this is a rectangle one. The other thing to notice is that the hole sizes for the bolts are significantly different. When we look at the actual bolts themselves, so this is the bolt for the Matco, and I'm probably putting it in the wrong side, but that's the bolt that would go in those particular holes. So I am going to have to upsize my bolts because these are significantly bigger. I haven't measured them yet, but it's probably a AN5 bolt or something like that. I think these are AN4s. It might be even an AN6 bolt. But anyway, so the bolts that the axle here attaches on with is much larger. Now it does introduce another little issue that has to be addressed, is that on the plans, if we look here, there's this shim that has to go between the main landing gear here and the axle itself. So if we look at this here, obviously it's a rectangle and it's going to have the holes that match up the size of the bolts that go on this here. And so that's not going to work, because if I pick the square piece and I put it on the rectangle piece, I don't have enough to cover this distance. And so what I've done is I've reached out to a local machine shop. Guy's actually GA experimental friendly, and he's in the process of milling me and there is a bevel on this too, so it's important to note that there is a bevel, and he's milling a piece that is going to be at the same gradient of the bevel, and it's going to be in rectangle and then have matching holes that go with it. This is actually kind of important because there's a camber on the axle itself. So that's another aspect of it. The bolts here come apart so you can get the actual wheel on. Very similar over here, but because it's tubeless, what happens is that it's very difficult to see here. I'll take it apart so you can see, but there's actually a seam. It's actually right here. It's actually that hard to see. There's a seam right here where the top portion here, you remove these 10 bolts, and then this section comes off, and it has a rubber bearing that seals the two together, so when you put air into it, it seals the wheel up. But when we look at the wheel itself, come around here, you'll see there's this tiny little hole, and that is where the air comes in when you use the nozzle. That's a hard nozzle on here, which is actually kind of cool. So I'm really liking these wheels a lot. The other thing is when we look at the these are the bolts that hold together the top portion of the brake. So when we take this apart, we've got this section here with those bolts. There's this plate that has the top brake on it. There's the bottom plate here, and then the shim between the two, and then this is the part that holds it on the center of the axle. So there's quite a few parts here that you have to mess with in order to do with the brakes, and I'm sure it'd probably get pretty quick at it or whatnot. With the Beringer, this is actually pretty cool. I stopped by the booth at Oshkosh this year and talked to them about it. You only have to remove one of these two bolts here. I have not taken that out yet, but the way they've got their brakes designed is that there's a you kind of see it in there a little bit. The brake actually has like a shim in it, or a catch. So if you take this bolt out, then the entire brake system comes out, or the brakes come out. So changing the brakes is just a matter of removing one of these bolts. So putting it back together is pretty straightforward. Basically, this part goes on here, and it's difficult to do with just one hand, but that goes on there, and then the shaft will go through, and I'll put it back together here in a second and show you sort of the other part on the mains. The other part that comes with the kit, so this is going to be the axle for the front wheel, all of the brake systems. One thing that's really also very cool that comes with it is that this piece here, they've got it engineered in a way that this is a dampener. I'm going to call it a dampener, but they call it an anti-lock brake system. So what you do is you fly it for a little bit, and then you get a full power test where the wheels are completely locked up, and then you just basically loosen this up enough so it's like right at the edge so that the wheels lock and hold, but they won't lock up like if you had differentiating surface, like if you had a wet surface or something like that, or like landing on a runaway that's got some ice or something on one side. So they call it an anti-lock braking system. I have not tested it, so I'm not exactly sure how well it works, but I believe that it's probably going to be pretty good. The other thing that it comes with is some steel braided brake hoses, and I did check. This does fit inside the little channel that comes with the landing gear, and then it comes with all the bolts and then the connectors and some of the other parts that go along with it. So I haven't gotten too far into that yet, but since I'm just back from Oshkosh, I'm reaching out to the guy that did the milling for this shim, and he said probably by the end of the week, this first week in August, and I should have those. So let's take a look at the main gear itself, so you can kind of see what I'm up against here. All right, so I'm down at the kind of almost where the landing gear level's at. I've got it up on the airplane's still up on sawhorses at this point in time. So the landing gear from Sling comes with the holes pre-drilled for the mat coat. So to get around that, what I'm going to do is backfill these holes with the fiberglass epoxy compound, which will basically reinforce these holes. And once that's done, then I will drill out the holes necessary to be able to match the new landing gear mount, which will be it'll be pretty close to about there. So basically the bottom of this is going to be just about in line with the actual bottom of the gear itself. So this cutout right here serves a purpose for the Matco, but I don't necessarily need it for this particular installation. So put the wheel back in there, and we'll look at it. So this is pretty close to how it's going to be. I've just got the square shim being held in there right now, and you can see I've got quite a bit of clearance here on this side. This is the disc side, and then the brake mechanism is down there. So it's going to be kind of about how it goes in there. All right, so I've got that bolted back down. I don't have any air in the tire yet, but what happens is once you kind of put a little bit of air going into it, the seal just on the bead for the tire just comes right up. When I go to put this back on the airframe, it's basically if the shaft is already on there, this part will go on, the brake, and then the little teeth go in yep, so I just grabbed it again, and it just sat right on there, so those teeth just go right inside. The bolts will line up with the brake itself. Gotta find the center on it here, there we go. So those bolts that holds the brake in place with the axle that's going to be bolted onto the landing gear itself, so that all keeps it there. So it's basically like 1, 2, 3 parts, as opposed to all of this over here with all these different little parts. And the brake pads are actually significantly bigger on the Beringer. So if you look at the size here, the brake pads run pretty much side to side. It's a little difficult to tell in the video, but even with a little bit of play in there, I mean, there's another probably inch or so extra brake pad that's on the Beringer. Anyway, so that is the kind of my overview of the differences between the Matco and the Beringer brakes. The one thing that I thought was really interesting was I was chatting with the Beringer folks at Oshkosh, and I mean, this isn't official or anything like that. I can't speak for Sling, but they did say that there is consideration for Sling to be moving to the Beringer brakes or Beringer wheels, or at least have that as an option going forward. The Sling high wings that just flew over from South Africa had those wheels on the plane itself, and that came from the factory. So there might be a change coming soon from Sling, but this is just kind of my overview and the reasons why I'm going with these wheels instead of the Matco. Thanks.